Toronto 1.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Yeah, you can hold the book right up there to our Facebook viewers. The Runaway Roza is the name of the book. We're going to talk about it here on Indiana in the Morning. Jonathan Bogert is with us from the Indiana County Historical and Genealogical Society, and he's brought someone with him. We're going to meet her. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Jonathan, I'm anxious. Introduce us.
Yes, it's good to be back, Todd. Thanks for having both of us on the show today. We have another author talk this month. More local history, more stories being told about the county's past. So as Janice held up the book, Roza the Runaway is the title of our next author talk with Janice Dembosky, taking place on this coming Thursday, April 18th at 6:30 p.m. at the Old National Guard Armory, Historical Society at the intersection of Wayne and 6th. So it's free. Folks are welcome to join us and delve into a fantastic telling of another tale of just local history. After reading the book, it was a very intimate look into life in rural America, Indiana County, and just a lot of the struggles that people went through at that time period. And we're very happy to be able to share that with folks on Thursday.
Janice, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us here today as we talk about this book that I assume you worked a really long time on. It looks very well done just from the size of it. You put a lot into it.
I worked on it for about 3 years, but I had it on the back burner of my mind for many more years.
Oh, yeah.
Prior to this, I had written an Amish series. I lived out near Smicksburg in old order Amish country, and I wrote about that because it was interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the book that I knew I had to write someday, and it required all kinds of research that I had some help, by the way, from Kitty Hood, who we just memorialized the other day.
Yeah.
And it just came about very casually. I would say, does anybody know when Waxler's opened? And Kitty was fantastic, and she would get back to me with the answer. So,
So introduce us to Roza.
Well, Roza is, and if you could see the cover, has a picture of 7 maids with my mother in the middle. And they worked at IUP when IUP had just become Indiana State Teachers College.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't a story about IUP, and although that's covered in it, it's the story of my mother who ran away from home when she was 15 to escape an abusive stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
And when she told her mother about it, her mother didn't want to hear it because she had already buried a husband or 2 in the mines, and this was her 3rd husband. And her response was to beat my mother. Back in those days, irons for ironing clothes had a big plug in the back. There was a big plug that plugged into the iron and one that plugged into the wall. And when my mother began to tell her, I've been sleeping in the barn, I've been sleeping in the loft, and I spend my nights hiding even in the woods. Her mother said she didn't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And she pulled this big plug out of the back of the iron and began whipping it at my mother. Well, my mother was very beaten and abused by her mother, too.
Wow.
And she told her to get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. Leave. And she was on a farm that was about 9 miles from Indiana. And my mother gave her one warning. There was a younger sister who was in utero when my mother's father was killed, and this younger sister's father too. And she said, when my sister comes of age, he's going to come after her too, and God will hold you responsible. Mm-hmm. And she was only 15, and she walked out of that house down a big long lane and walked 9 miles to Indiana.
Wow.
That's the basis of the story.
and you tell it in an extensive book. I'm very impressed by the size of the book, but that just means that there's a lot of material in it, and we learn about Indiana County, number one, but we learn this compelling story. When you were a little girl, how much of your mother's history did you know?
Not a lot, because she wasn't fond of talking about it, of course.
Yeah.
But I had an aunt. I guess if I were not Indiana County raised, I would say aunt. But my Aunt Veda was an older sister who was his first person that he pursued.
Mm-hmm.
She was Paul Legaunt's daughter, the first husband who had died in the big disaster in 1916.
16, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived to be almost 100. Although she was not educated, you would have never believed it. She wrote like a lawyer, very profuse vocabulary, clarity, and she lived in Michigan.
Oh.
And she and my mother would talk on the phone, and I would hear them talking about what had happened to them. And I would say, Mom, tell me about it. And she didn't want to talk about it. So one day I called Aunt Veda. And she told me many details, wrote me letters, and she passed away before the book came out, but she was very instrumental in giving me information that my mother was kind of reluctant to give.
As you were putting a book such as this together, I'm sure the memories of those conversations become very fresh to you again.
Well, one of the comments I made about doing the research and rewriting this book, I mean, my mother died in 1990 and my father in 1985, and their love story is in this book. And it was not all, hearts and flowers. There were rough times. But I felt like I was visiting with my parents for the 3 years. It's like they were present every day. I was with them. I was thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved that part of it. But when my mother was on her deathbed in 1990, terminally ill, she's the person that probed me to write. In fact, I was teaching school then, and I was teaching at Purchase Line at the time. I taught English, and I would sit with her on the weekends because we had nurses that came in during the week. She was terminally ill, but at home. And I was always checking papers, which is what any good English teacher is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sitting there wearing a oxygen mask, and she croaked out to me, Janice, you've disappointed me. And, this is not something you want to hear from
that
dying
would be
mother.
devastating.
So I asked, what do you mean by that, Mother? What have I done or not done? And she said, I always thought you would write a book, but you were too lazy to do it. And I said, Mother, I have not been lazy. I have been raising 3 children, teaching school, helping my husband in his business. How can you say that I'm lazy? She said, well, ever since you were in school, your teachers would tell me that you were a writer and a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So she asked me, start writing a book. You told me you had an idea. Write it. I got 8 chapters written before she died.
Mm-hmm.
And she had read those first 8 chapters. And the first book was the first of the Amish series, which was called The Bondwoman, an Amish woman's love with a man and a love affair with a man on the outside. And I had been not making the Amish girl the main character, and my mother said, oh, she has to be the main character. So she was my first editor.
Uh-huh.
So at one point, when I was cleaning out drawers for her while she was still living, she asked me if I would write this story someday. Not I want you to, but are you thinking about it?
Oh, okay.
And I said, I am. And she said, well, when you get to the rough parts about me and your dad, go easy on your dad, because it was my fault too. And I said, okay, Mom. I said, I love my dad. I would never not go easy on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her if I should go easy on anybody else. She said, not my abuser.
Oh, my.
So
Oh,
I did
my.
not go easy on him.
Your mother had quite the story to tell, too, and she
did.
she asked you
She
to be a
did.
part of that story.
Right.
The book is called The Runaway Roza, and Janice Dembosky has been our guest here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. You're going to be speaking on Thursday at the Historical and Genealogical Society at the Old Armory. Jonathan, the time again?
6:30 p.m. Again, that's Thursday the 18th at 6:30 p.m. Free event. All are welcome to attend.
It'll be a wonderful event, too. We're very happy that you brought Janice in to visit with us today, too. We appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. It's 23 minutes after 9 o'clock. The Sports with Boomer coming up in just a moment or so. We need to get this morning's Money Matters report in, and for that we turn to Aaron Rayal.
Apple has lost its spot as the world's top smartphone maker to Samsung. Pippa Stevens reports.
Data from